Abby Garcia, and I'm your host for Thoughts on That, a podcast where we dissect pretty much everything and anything under the sun. And today, we're going to talk about individualism versus realism.
Idealism, not individualism.
Just kidding. We're going to talk about idealism versus realism. But that's a good topic too, to talk about individualism versus collectivism. But let's save that for another podcast. And today I'm joined by our guest, Hayden Royalty. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Thanks for coming onto the show. I know it means a lot. It takes a lot of time to be here. And for those of you who don't know, Hayden and I are in a relationship. Well, we were talking earlier today about like our personalities to start off. And if you guys don't know, I'm a very like idealist person. Do you think so, Hayden?
So you say?
So I say. I'm asking about you though. Like, do you think that about me?
I used to.
So that's changed.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
Boo. I don't know. Simple as that. Obviously, they're a realist person. That's all they're giving me. It's just.
I mean, this podcast, we decided to talk about idealism versus realism, right? Because you call yourself an idealist, and I call myself a realist, right? And the point of having this conversation was just to talk about those differences and also how that works out in our relationship.
Right, that's true.
Yeah. So what is an idealist versus
a realist? So let's go to the textbook definition. So like idealism is when you envision or see things in an ideal world or perfect manner. Realism, on the other hand, tends toward a more pragmatic and actual view of a situation. So definitely more objective versus subjective.
Okay.
Yeah, and so that's a textbook definition. But like, in terms of your personality, how would you say is like a realist person?
I think a lot of realists tend to be a bit more pessimistic.
Pessimistic?
Yeah.
Interesting.
They always are like expecting the worst but hoping for the best, but still expecting the worst.
Why do you think like realist people are more like pessimistic then? Like negative?
Because the real world is not all perfect and happy and butterflies and rainbows and unicorns.
It's not gay. I swear the world was gay.
How about we talk about why we think we've become idealists and realists? I mean, I'm a person who likes to like think chronologically, and so I'm thinking about like growing up,
right?
You know, how our idealists formed, how our realists formed, what was their background. Maybe that's what molded their ideas of like realism and idealism. And I was thinking just a while ago about my like I guess childhood, and I think that my childhood is one of the reasons why I'm a realist.
That's interesting.
And I think it's just the way I grew up, because you know my parents are Korean immigrants, and I'm pretty sure the world was not kind to them, and especially like moving to a new country. I'm sure it had its challenges, and a lot of that comes to like survival. And so I think growing up, I had that. I was raised with that like survival mentality where like you can't dream too big because that's not realistic, and you can't just dream to be anything you want. And you have to be able to like survive in this world. So, you know, go the safe route. And the safe route is always something that's more like obtainable, more valuable, or not valuable, more obtainable, more accessible, and maybe a little bit more quote unquote real. And like applying like, you know, like whatever is logical to you. I mean, people see subjects as like math and science as logic more than like art and anything else is more of like the subjective subjects. And from that, it was always what made me grow up to be a realist. Yeah, because it takes a lot to like dream big. Right. And sometimes dreaming big is not possible for I think a lot of minorities,
Right,
especially
right.
if you're like racial minority,
Right.
sexual minority.
So like how a lot of Asian American immigrants are bogged down with like the issue of like being in the math or science realm or route for like career wise, and like having that upbringing makes you more tended to be a realistic person because that's what brings stability.
Right.
Yeah.
And like survival. It's a
Right,
survival mentality.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always wonder, like, you know, your parents are also people like immigrant.
Background or they're immigrants. They are immigrants. Yes. Scalp. Period.
I mean, your parents are also immigrants, and but like, why are you idealist? I wonder because I'm sure there's like people who come from similar backgrounds, but there's always a different outcome, and I think it's always case by case.
Yeah.
And I do think that just because you're from an immigrant background doesn't mean you're gonna be a realist.
Exactly.
I think some people see their experience of like moving abroad to be like a channel of like new opportunities and positive opportunities and like definitely an opportunity to get have their lives better than what it could have been in their home country.
Right.
And so sometimes I think those views of your opportunities can channel like you to have a more idealistic
Right.
point of view, like, wow, like the world I did this and the world was able to like give me this kind of life,
That makes sense.
and it's like a life I never imagined. And then you like trickle down that to your kids and say like, if you work hard enough you can do this too, and blah, blah blah.
If you dream big, then like you'll be able to achieve.
Perhaps, yeah.
Something like that. I see. That makes sense.
How about you?
Well, I mean, actually, when you're explaining yourself with your own experience with growing up and then how that's shaped with realistic values, I think despite having my family still being, immigrants and having this similar mentality, I definitely think because I was exposed to the arts and that I have a very artistic background, like with theater, music, dance, having like exposure and being constantly active in those communities has like definitely shaped how I view the world in terms of like idealistic an idealistic perspective, like especially with the arts, like creativity is very strong in terms of inspiration, and a lot of inspiration comes from like idealistic perspectives. And so I kind of found myself like separating from the immigrant mentality of becoming a doctor and immerse myself in those communities that were based on like inspiration and motivation, which were inherently idealistic.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So you were in the arts,
Right.
and your background is in the arts, but like what encouraged you to be in that? Because like my parents, like your mom is a nurse,
Right.
your dad fixes cars. I still think that's like, I mean, I guess you can call it as an art, but I also think like it's like engineering, kind of more like engineering.
It's like more hard.
Yeah, and your mom is a nurse, and that's also in the sciences, and so those are very science and math like background.
Right.
My parents, believe it or not, like my mom was an artist, like a graphic designer. For I don't know for how long, but I know that she was like working for like Boeing and doing like graphic design.
Cool.
And then like my dad, I don't exactly know his like job experience, but I do know like he really enjoyed drawing, and so he drew a lot of like caricatures and like art when we were growing up. And so like I don't know, like why didn't they encourage their kids to also have that similar like art background?
Right. I mean, like I said, it depends on like, does it serve you? Like, will it get you places other than like the fact that it's a hobby?
Yeah.
Or something like maybe your parents.
But my mom, it was like not a hobby for her; it was a job. She worked for Boeing.
Okay.
Do you know what Boeing is?
No.
Oh, it's like they make airplanes.
Boeing, like Boeing. The model.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The model's not a company.
Yeah.
It's a company.
I'm pretty sure it's an airplane model.
Oh,
Maybe it's a company name too because it's an airplane model. Anyway, we digress.
So I guess it's coming. It's also like, yeah, what made your parents support you in the arts?
Well, I mean, generally, my dad's a very supportive person. I think because he pushed for me to like continue with these things, because I think they generally genuinely saw a talent in me. I think they saw how the potential I had, even though it's a hard life too. Like, it's okay to have it as a hobby. So because it gave me enough joy and it gave me a lot of attention, definitely. Anyway, I was good in terms of like singing and dancing. And so like, okay, she gets enough attention. Let's just like let her have that and everything. But I think it got rocky though later when I wanted to actually pursue it in terms of professionally. And that was kind of hard to convince them, but I mean, I'm here now.
Right. So you still continue to hold that idealist perspective all the way till Korea.
Right.
And I think I also continue to have a very realist point of view, perspective, all the way up to Korea. And especially all the way up to Korea, because I think moving to Korea, it's like I'm in survival mode to adjust to my environment, to adjust to a new culture, to learn about a culture that like I like spent a lot of my life kind of just like hating, not really hating, but like not really appreciating.
Right.
Anyways, and so a lot of that realism came from like even like in relationships, like my point of view in like being very like realistic and like pessimistic about relationship was that I don't know if a relationship I have in Korea will like be lasting.
Interesting.
Because sometime in the future am I gonna go back? I am gonna go back.
Yeah.
And so then like what's gonna happen to the relationship that I am in, especially if the person I'm in a relationship is Korean. And so a lot of my relationships, actually, I don't think I've ever told anyone, but they were not, like, I never really dreamed big or long for them.
Right.
It's just for the moment being like, this is fun.
Not for the moment that this is fun, but, like, it's for the moment and it's good.
Okay.
And, like, why don't we just enjoy what we have right now?
Yeah.
But it was never really, like, future plans.
I see.
Planning for the future. Yeah. Because, I don't know what's going to happen. I might go back and, like, they can't necessarily follow back.
But then I feel like, can I comment on like that mentality too? Like I feel like how safe that is as well to keep yourself from getting hurt and too much emotionally invested. Like I think that makes sense as to why some people are more realistic. But like, of course, it's not going to go farther if you make it a reality. Like it's not going to go farther. Like if you put that boundary on the relationship, then it's not going to go more than you expect. But that's like, of course, if you want that.
For me, I didn't really think it was like I didn't want to get hurt and like this isn't a lasting, like this isn't a meaningful relationship. Like the relationships were meaningful, and they had a lot of depth, and there was a lot of like growing in them. But I think it was just in terms of like our future was limited.
I see.
Yeah, because realistically speaking, either we were gonna spend our lives in Korea or spend our lives in America.
Right.
And America is not that great for people to move over and start over, and like the whole visa thing.
Right.
But like my visa issue in Korea is fine. But also like queer relationship isn't recognized in Korea, so that's an issue. Yeah, it's just, I think because the laws in every country is so different, I think that's also what prevented me to think more further into the future of a relationship.
Like I mean, like physically, technically speaking, there's actually something there that's stopping you.
Like I guess in the beginning it was more like realism and like this relationship has no future because of what I said before. But I think now that I'm like also talking about it more, I'm also realizing that I guess I was using like legal issues for an excuse too. The real reason is I just don't know if I'll end up like getting married.
I see.
Yeah, maybe marriage is
Logistical?
not for me.
I see.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, it'd be nice to be married, at least in my perspective, because it's nice to have like benefits, the official partnership, and like, you know, we romanticize marriage so much too, and I feel like it's very idealistic to romanticize marriage.
Yeah.
It's like honeymoons are fun. Oh my god, the big parties are fun.
It's just
Weddings, you mean?
Yeah, sure. Weddings. What is it? Receptions, Monday, but. You know, of course, there's a lot of work that goes into that if you talk about the realistic aspect of it. But I think just the idea of it is very stimulating. It's like a dream. Okay, so we talked about like why maybe what has shaped us in the past to be a realistic and idealistic person. How do you think you being a realistic person and me being an idealistic person has impacted our relationship or has shaped our relationship throughout the time? All right, well, for me, because I know I'm still a very idealistic person, but I know you've mentioned that I have become more realistic throughout our relationship. I think it's because that's your involvement with it. Like, you have definitely brought me down. Not brought me down. Brought me closer to earth.
Grounded you?
Yes, that's the word. Grounded me.
But do you think that is because of that, or as like age also does that?
Yeah, I think age as well. And then, of course, like mid-20s and then having a more focus on my career as well.
Because you came to Korea like your early 20s.
right.
And now that you're like past the middle point of your 20s,
Right.
like things are coming more real, like of a reality.
Yeah.
Because isn't like a lot of people's like first few years in Korea just like all fun and games?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely Korea has impacted my view of the world. And not that if it's pessimistic, but it's just more like a wake-up call. Like, all right, I need to be doing more action. I need to like actively make moves. So I need to develop myself. Because I think in Korea, it's easy to just like have an ideal of like traveling the world, culture, but then like kind of ignoring other parts of yourself that you should be developing as well.
I think so too.
Yeah, and so that has definitely made me focus on my skill sets and my like professional aspects.
I think it could go both ways living in Korea.
Yeah.
You either like really like quote unquote find yourself and like develop yourself, or you just party 5 years straight.
Yeah.
Your whole life, your whole stay in Korea.
That's how people navigate.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean by like when you do that, sometimes you just ignore a lot of
Right.
the development.
Yeah.
Do you think that's an idealistic sense of life?
I don't know. Can't really personally talk about that.
That makes sense.
But
Well,
and I don't want to be judging people who do that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, maybe there's not one way to just say one thing's idealistic or one thing's realistic. Maybe it's just something else.
So you said that you thought that like dating me like grounded you a bit, but then you're realizing maybe it hasn't. It hasn't been me, but
I mean, it has been you, but it's like a mixture of me wanting to develop myself more professionally.
But how do you think I have? Like what?
Well, I mean, sometimes like when I get super excited by like a project or by like a certain idea or by like a place, like let's travel there or like all this stuff. And you're like, that sounds great, but let's take a second. Like, wait a minute, can we really do that? You like play devil's advocate with me a lot more. And I think because someone so close to me is asking me these questions, I've been able to look at those questions a lot more deeply and sit with that. Because I don't ask myself those questions. Like, what if, like, I want to do this, but then like take a second, like, all right, but what if this would happen? But, you know, what if this issue happens? Can this be possible? X, Y, Z. And because you're more upfront with that, I've been able to do that more with myself. So it's kind of like a practice. Like I've developed that small sense of realism streak in my hair because of you.
Interesting.
yeah.
I don't know if your idealism has rubbed off on me, but I think that your idealism has.
Like, would you say you appreciate things more?
Yeah.
All right.
appreciate things more, dream more, or I guess dream more. I guess there's I see newer opportunities, newer possibilities.
Right.
But I also think that like, I don't know if it's like necessarily your idealism or it's just your personality, but I think there's more joking around.
Really?
Jokes. I just like more laughing, joking around.
Which I think laughing and lightheartedness is like an aspect of an idealistic person. So because there's more optimistic vibes, you can make more jokes of things.
I'm trying to say all this without sounding cheesy.
Why?
Because I think if I sound cheesy, I'm gonna cry.
Aww. Let's cry. Vulnerability.
I'm gonna cry.
I learned a lot because you're realistic. Like I feel like because you've definitely impacted me combined with Korea's impact on me, I've definitely had a more stable ground to project my ideas on, because I've always been like a creative person, but sometimes I just don't know how to execute them. But I think with your grounding personality, you've helped me find a ground to grow my seeds.
What?
It sounds so weird. To project my seeds, to project my ideas and into reality. There we go.
I also feel like the way it's impacted our relationship is like, we don't just like, like a romantic relationship. I also think that we do a lot of projects together.
Right.
And we work together. And I think that a idealistic and a realistic perspective that we both have.
Mm-hmm.
And like it works pretty well when we work together, because I think, like we both have this like dream, and I think you keep the dream alive as an idealist.
You keep the dream alive. That sounds like a slogan for like someone's team, or like the way you end a commencement speech. Keep the dream alive, class of 2020.
Anyways, so I think that, okay, I'm gonna say it again. You keep the dream alive, and like you don't let us lose like way of that, like the path.
Right.
And then I guess my realist views are like playing devil's advocate again, like also like if this is gonna go, like what do we have to do? We have to think about this, and we have to do that, and we have to think about this.
Right.
And then I think that's how we keep going, because like we realize we have to do this and this and that, and so we try to do this and this and that.
Right.
But sometimes when you have so much to do, you give up.
Yeah.
But then I think that realist perspective of like keeping the dream alive, you don't give up.
Yeah.
What?
The idealist perspective.
Oh, sorry. The idealist perspective of keeping the dream alive is like, it helps us not give up.
That makes sense. Like kind of same thing for like a lot of organizations. Like in order to succeed, you keep the mission in mind. Like the mission statement is what keeps people going.
Right.
And then the small steps there are the realistic things that get it into motion.
Right. Because I think that like things can happen just on the idealist base, in my opinion.
Right.
Like I'm always for like a mix of things, not just one or the other. And I also think just as a realist, it's also hard to accomplish a lot of like dreams and goals.
Kind of like you lose faith, maybe.
I think when you have too many like barriers, you just tend to give up.
Because I think it makes sense. Like a lot of realistic people, like they can have the action to do it, but then like if they don't have the motivation, like the lighthearted aspect of it, then it's gonna be harder to push themselves to going, which makes sense, because I think motivation eventually comes from inspiration, it comes from dreaming.
And so I think we work well together.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like this has definitely been really smooth in terms of like, I mean, granted that we've been having communication things, that's something we work on, but I think because we both have a mentality where we want to make it work. Like my idealistic self is like, I generally believe in the good of this. And then you, with the realistic aspect of like, all right, what can we do to make it good? I think both of that combined has helped us grow.
Yeah. And sometimes I do think that like a part of it is like a part of being realist is like, especially working on projects and especially working on like business things, it's you get lost in like capitalism.
Right.
But then I think the idealist person helps you also like to not think so much about capitalism and to think about like the mission.
Right.
Yeah, which I think is great for like what you mentioned again, like organizations.
Because like they both feed off of each other. Like in a world we can't rely basically on realism or rely basically on idealism. Like there has to be a balance between the two. Like in a healthy relationship. Like there's something online that there was like a quote. It says, "Idealism inspires, realism works."
Yeah, and it's great if one person can like embody that. And I think that's the goal, to embody that and like be able to like balance that out for yourself. But it's also really hard, and so it's great to have people around you.
That's why it's good. Like even if you're not dating someone who's specifically like opposite from you, it's good to have a community of folks who are both realistic and idealistic. Like have a mixture of everyone, and that's why it's good to have a diverse group of people to be surrounded by with, so that you can constantly be held accountable for, but also constantly be inspired by and like motivated by. So
Yeah.
wow, dang, good talk. But listeners, how about y'all? Just curious, what do you describe yourself as? Are you an idealistic person, a realistic person, or would you say you're a mix of both? And what do those characteristics look like? Also, how do you find realism and idealism has impacted your own relationships? Not just romantic relationships, but also friendships, family relationships, acquaintanceships, workships, all of the ships. And don't forget to like and subscribe our channel. So far, we're just on YouTube and SoundCloud, but hopefully we'll be up soon on bigger podcast platforms. So please help us grow by sharing and liking and telling everyone about this podcast. And also mention in the comments, what would you like to see on Thoughts on That? Anyway, I'm Abby Garcia, and thanks for listening to Thoughts on That. We'll see you next time. In the meantime, stay inspired.